Hi, I'm Pierre. I'm a software engineer here at Statsig.
And I'm Craig. I'm a data scientist here at Statsig.
We used to work on the gaming team together at Facebook. We're here today to talk about metric selection.
No matter how good the tooling you're using for experimentation is, there's not really much of a point in running it if you're not actually paying attention to the right outcomes and metrics in your experiment.
It's often difficult to choose the right metric for the changes that you're trying to assess. One example of an experiment that we ran back at Facebook was we were trying to improve the ranking of a user's feed to show them more personalized content. The metric that we chose was sessions, and when we launched the test, we did see sessions go up, so we decided to launch the change. After some time though, we saw a lot of user complaints and overall user usage go down. The change that we had shipped introduced a new crash in some instances. So the reason that the sessions metric was going up was that users were needing to restart their app and reload their feed.
We think we could have avoided the whole situation by just taking some time and thinking through what we actually wanted to measure and change with this experiment.
So let's discuss a framework that you can use to think through the metrics that you want to use to measure your experiment before you actually start your test.
So the first step is to think about metrics that show your change is actually doing something. This could be clicks on a button. It could be that people scroll because of performance increasing. It should be something about how users are interacting in the first order.
There are a number of different metrics you could choose. For example, clicks, sessions, or session length.
There's not always going to be a single metric that perfectly captures everything you're doing, but it's worth talking to your team or maybe to yourself and figuring out, what do I think the first thing I should see is? And what is the main thing I'm trying to drive people or the system to do? If you don't see that moving, you might want to ask why. If you make a button twice as big and you don't see users interacting with it differently, there's probably something going on, or you were just wrong about that button being changeable. The next step is figuring out what sort of business objectives you're trying to drive with your change. This connection doesn't have to be direct, but there should be some sort of plausible chain by which you get from point A to point B and impact your business goals.
One of the biggest mistakes you can make is not thinking about your business metrics at all and just running your experiment and then looking to see which metrics changed, if any. It's very easy to come up with a story to explain why that metric movement is happening, even if that's not the underlying truth.
From the data scientist perspective, that's how you get into trouble with things like p-hacking. You want to have a specific hypothesis that you're measuring in an experiment, and picking these business and mechanical metrics ahead of time is how you avoid doing that. The last step is figuring out what your guardrail or trade-off metrics ought to be.
You're very rarely going to run an experiment where you see every single metric move in the way that you expect. So it's very important to understand which trade-offs you're willing to make. One common guardrail metric is performance. You may improve the quality of the content that is being shown in the feed, but if you regress the performance and the feed now takes 5 seconds to load, that might be a very bad user experience overall.
Another thing to watch out for is cannibalization. If you're making one surface more prominent or easier to use, you might be regressing metrics on other parts of your app. When we use Statsig, we'll generally have a collection of core metrics that we keep an eye on in almost every experiment, just to make sure that we're not regressing things. Another guardrail to watch out for is if you're using ratio metrics to track the numerator and denominator. In some experiments, you might increase both the denominator and the numerator of a metric. The numerator is actually what you care about, but the ratio might go down. Tracking both sides of the equation lets you actually understand what's going on. To recap, the stages of our metric framework are picking a mechanical metric, which is what we're actually driving first order with our change, picking the business metric that we think that mechanical metric will ladder up to, and then setting up guardrail metrics or trade-offs that we might want to monitor with our change.
At Statsig, we make all of this extremely easy to do. You can set your key metrics and a hypothesis. You can set up collections of metrics for performance or core metrics that you might want to monitor for every single change that you're rolling out. These will be automatically computed for every single change that you put into production.
As the official data scientist caveat, you have a hypothesis about your key metrics, and you're evaluating that with a statistically rigorous way. What you should be doing, though, is following up and generating hypotheses about what you see in the rest of your data. This can often point to new features or point to holes in the current experience.
The first version of a product that you're going to put out into the world is rarely going to be perfect, but putting it into users' hands can quickly identify issues and help you resolve those.